welcome to another episode of Hoda's Career Info. I am your host, Hoda Kilani, career and academic coach at Right Career Fit. Coaching is all about storytelling, helping you to envision and tell your story your way. I put this series together to share stories of inspiring career people from across the globe. I hope their stories motivate you to envision your career story, discover your road to success, or recast your career path. More importantly, I hope that you love these career stories as much as I do. Our guest today is global career guy, Dr. Brian Hutchison.
Career development work is good life work. Particularly in the West, we can get this idea of individualism in our head, and I think that that is an inaccurate idea. We need to lean in more to the development part of our name and less into the career. We want to use language to let them know that this is an ongoing, lifelong process, not an end of the road.
I appreciate you joining me in Hoda's Career Info, your career program where guests from across the globe share career tips and personal stories to help you successfully navigate your career. Watch, listen, and learn. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media for more career info. And please make sure you have that very important career conversation with a career professional. Our guest, Dr. Brian Hutchison, is core faculty of clinical mental health counseling in the School of Counseling at Walden University, USA. Dr. Brian received his doctorate degree in Counselor Education and Supervision from Pennsylvania State University and has worked as a career, school, and mental health counselor and clinical supervisor. His career consultation and education work operates within the brand of Global Career Guy, where he specializes in consultation, research, speaking, and training focused on how career development fosters mental health well-being, school engagement, and social justice. He has worked in more than 50 countries and written more than 4 dozen publications, including the 12th edition of School to Career, a career textbook for high school students, as well as International Practices of Career Services, Credentials, and Training Monograph. Stay with me today as Dr. Brian challenges our understanding of the role of career development. Dr. Brian Hutchison, also known as the Global Career Guy. Welcome to Hoda's Career Info. Thank you so much for agreeing to join me today.
I'm excited to be here.
So right away, the first question I ask everyone, what is the term that best describes your work and how would you define it from your perspective?
So I just was in a support group this week, and they put this image on the screen and asked us to pick which term described us best. And so I think I'll start with that term. I'm pretty sure I'm a disruptor. And by that, I mean, I have an insatiable curiosity and an insatiable desire to try to make people's lives better, particularly through career development. And so when I look at our field, I see a lot of things that are based on culture, based on habit over time that I believe might need to be disrupted, not because they're bad things, but because they don't impact a client's life nearly as much as they could. I think we have a very powerful tool, and we need to do everything, and that tool is career development. And I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that that tool is creating the most good in the world and the most good in clients' lives. So I'm going to go with disruptor, even though that's not a job title.
This is a perfect term. It does describe who you are. I've been watching you, as I told you before, for a couple of years now, and definitely a disruptor and innovator in that you were the global career guy before anyone was working globally as career development professionals.
I would say, for fairness, though, there are plenty of people that I look to as mentors that were working globally before I coined that term. In Canada, I think of Roberta Nyalt at the time, Borgen now. I think of Dick Nodell, who has passed away recently. I think of one of my mentors, Dr. Mark Pope. So I really see myself as having met a branding moment, but really trailing behind some people who have been significant in the world and in my life.
Well, it's very cool to talk about mentors because we always
Yeah.
remind our clients that you need to have a mentor, you need to have role models because then they will help you to aim higher. The next question is about your story. Some people like to list their whole story, how they got into the field and so on. And some people pick a story and give us a message to the audience.
I think the important parts of my background to understand me and why I want to have the impact in the field that I want to have is I grew up in a working class family and a working class community. I'm a first generation college student in my family. I did not have a sense of career direction. I like to describe my teenage years and my early adulthood as just hustling. There was a year actually when I did my taxes in the United States where I had to turn in 19 W-2 forms. So I had 19 different part-time jobs in one year. And so, I feel so fortunate, maybe not a mentor, but someone I got to know well at the end of his life was John Crumbolts. And so me in career development, my perspective is informed by my life experience prior to the moment when I learned about this field. My participation in the field goes to another mentor that I've not mentioned so far, Dr. Spencer Niles or Skip Niles, another globally focused career development practitioner long before I got into the field. And he, in my mind, saw something in me that I didn't know existed. He actually invited me to study and get my Ph.D. with him because I had him in a class, and I had actually worked with his daughter, Jenny, a little bit through the Career Services Center, through my graduate assistant in my master's program. So I feel like one of the things I think about, right, is like career information and career culture. I needed people to see things in me and help me in because I couldn't see it yet. I couldn't see what it was. I couldn't see what it meant. I couldn't see what it could be. And now, I think of Dr. Mark Savickas. I'm name dropping, but Mark Savickas' quote, how as adults, we're all trying to actively master what we once passively suffered. And I feel like it's those mentors that showed me the window, the door, and invited me in. And I feel like that's what I spend most of my time, focus, and energy on in the work that I do. I want to help people see what the possibility of a good life is. And career has to be a part of that because of the way the world is organized.
Thank you for sharing your story and
Yeah.
highlighting the value of mentors again. What would be one message you'd like to share?
I think it's particularly in the West, we can get this idea of individualism in our head. And I think that is an inaccurate idea because even when we think we are doing something alone, that just simply means we're not seeing or recognizing all of the supports that brought us to that moment of an alone sort of action. So for me, it's about togetherness. It's about community. It's about communication. And so I'm not looking like if I look at the field of career development, I don't care about superstars because I don't think an individual person is a change agent for good. I think it's collectives. I think it's people coming together And you're a perfect example of that through this platform, right? Like you're not monetizing this, you're not promoting, like you are simply trying to bring together a collective of people who are invested in career development and give them a microphone so that the world can become a better place. This is where the good stuff is, not this sort of idea of an individual, a genius, a savant. Like it's people coming together that I believe that's my belief system that makes the world a better, and for me a more just, right, a more just and equitable place.
Such an important message. And yes, it is reflective of our field. If I didn't feel the field would welcome these interviews, I wouldn't be doing them. So
Yeah,
we're definitely a collective for sure.
yeah.
My next question to you, Dr. Brian, is about your work in the World column. You highlight the work of career development professionals from across the globe, such
Yeah.
as Raza Abbas from Pakistan, Ahmed Mustafa Kamal from Egypt. What can you tell us about career development around the world today? So, from
Hmm.
all of these interviews and, of course, your work across the globe, what can you tell us about the trends, the models that are current today?
I think that there is more togetherness in the world today than there has ever been. And that togetherness is, it shows up most in my mind, not in us adapting the same models and techniques and theories, but in confronting the same problems and in how we're trying to figure out a way to respond to the problems of career development that I see in the world today. And those problems do have to do with the context in the world, right? So I think there are more similarities in economically developed countries and what career development looks like than in non-economic developed countries. Yet there is a through line, right? There is a sameness there on the challenges that we're meeting. And I can talk about the challenges, but I don't know how deep you want me to go into that.
Yes, I'd like you to highlight the challenges, please.
Okay. So I think that, I mean, the one that we talk the most about in the field today is technology, artificial intelligence, things such as that. Very, very, I would say, popular to talk about. I think the challenge in front of us is I'm not sure that we're talking about it in the way that is most useful to clients. And so what we have is a world that's dynamically changing. It's changing our tools. Yes, we like to talk about that. It's changing the world of work. Yes, we like to talk about that. But there's this human tendency to be enthusiastic about these changes without first pausing and thinking about how does this affect a client, right? And so a lot of my work in the last few years, and other people, I mean, there are great organizations all over the world doing this, but it really is about bringing in more humanistic information, thought, and process to it to balance out the effects of the technology on the workers, right? So, like, I see the tools, right? It is, I've seen systems that integrate artificial intelligence into career planning that blow my mind, right? I see entire governments using artificial intelligence to create new career systems. But at the end of the day, there's a client sitting there getting all of these dominant messages from a society and asking the question, like, but what about me? Right? Like, what is the me in this? And the answer isn't to make a world of 7 billion content creators, right? And there's another sort of place where our enthusiasm can get ahead of what our clients need. It's really fun to talk about content creation, but like someone still has to pick up the trash outside or we're going to have a cholera epidemic, right? And so it's just this constant thing of trying to massage us back to a better home base, a better center point to make sure that we're client focused and client centered. It is the one that I think about with technology. The other one that we hear about that I think is associated with technology is what we used to call soft skills. I've made a model for my textbook called 21st Century Career Skills. A lot of people call it something like that today. But I think we need to redo our pattern of thinking as career development professionals when we think about helping clients with these types of skills. Like, as an example, I really like the work of this professor at Brown University, Mark Dunkelman. He's like, so technology is good and bad depending on what type of skill that you're talking about, what type of relationship. So he calls them inner, middle, outer relationships. And he says social media and technology helps with inner relationships, which are like our family, which is where we find love. And a lot of us communicate with our partner or our children or our family a lot more frequently now than we might have before these technologies. He would also say that on the outer edge is like our tribe, right? Like if you follow a sports team in Turkey, like you can actually talk to people in Turkey about your sports team and like see interviews with the players on the team, right? Or your faith or something like that. So any of these big and politics, unfortunately, right? And that level is about loyalty, right? Where we get our needs for loyalty met. He would say the gap is the middle, which is sort of the village level, which is where tolerance happens. And a lot of clients, I think, have great skills for relationships, communication, soft skills, but technology and the way the world's unfolding like has put a gap in there where we have to think about this in new different ways, right? It can't just be soft skills, can you communicate? It has to be, well, how are these types of skills laid out in the new world that we've created with some nuance? Dunkelman's work is just one way to look at it with more nuance, but and it's the way that I prefer to look at it. So it really is. I feel like I'm rambling too much, Hoda, but it really is like we don't have to change everything we do. We have to revisit everything we do to make it adaptable to the new world. And it's weird that it's hard for us to do, right? Because that's what we help clients do. We help them change their patterns so they can adapt to the new world of work. Yet we're still using theories, techniques, models, definitions, processes from 50 years ago, right? We've not changed as much as the world of work and the world has changed. And I think that's our challenge, right? That's our challenge as a profession. And we only meet that challenge together, to go back to that theme.
I love how you dug deep, and I appreciate you sharing Dunkelman's theory. I will be looking into it for sure.
Super. It's one of those things where you learn. I read about it the first time, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's what I've been trying to say in like workshops for 5 years, and he just said it well. He just said it very clearly and concisely, and so give him credit and use it. Right? That's the way I like to think about my work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is perfect because my next question was along this line, where I have done presentations, several of them, on how the role of us as career development professionals is changing. And I've gotten positive and negative feedback in that, no, it's still the same. So, from your experience and from what you just said, how has our role changed? Where do you see us today as career development professionals?
I think we need to lean in more to the development part of our name and less into the career. Right. And so the technology, the artificial intelligence is going to fill a lot of the career gaps that we've all gotten very comfortable with. Labor market information, assessment, right? Like that's where the new technologies are going to outperform us. And the hard part as human beings is a lot of people in the field, that's where they got their comfort, right? I can talk about jobs, I can talk about assessment, I can talk about this one model that I've grown very comfortable with. The development part, which is really human development, right? From Donald Super and what we've built off of that, that's the harder part because that is understanding that our new role for the current moment has to meet it requires some new skills of us. And so I think of your colleagues in Canada, David Redekop and Michael Houston, right? They're amazing book that is free through CEREC, by the way, to download. Wait, I have my copy somewhere. I was just using it. I use it all the time. That's not asking us to become psychologists or clinical mental health counselors. It's asking us to recognize the links between the supports that we know how to provide and just framing them with clients as, and this is a way to build a better life as far as mental health and wellness goes. Okay. I think we need to be more also interested in the biological effects of work And that includes things like ability and disability, but it also includes things like sleep and how work interrupts the patterns of a healthy life, workplace toxins, things like that. And so I tend to take what's called a biopsychosocial perspective on what we do. How do we understand the biology of the biological effects of the work choices that we make and the environments they put us in, the psychological effects, and then, of course, the sociological effects as well of how our work opportunities is somewhat pre-designed by the society we live in, the place that we live in, the social class of our parents, right? There's all of these effects, and that takes us away from a comfort zone, right? So the task, that we've all done, resume writing is becoming less important. We've built an entire profession around that. And I'm sure that there'll be some sort of way that that profession will try to find out how to say that it's performing better than artificial intelligence, and maybe it will. But I think that that's not where the future is. I think the future is more on the person side, the developmental part of our title, and the career now is the trailing part. How does having a good life give you a good career, and how does a good career support a good life?
This is perfect. And I appreciate your focus on the humanistic part because that's what we're all about. And
Yeah.
that's really what the next question is going to challenge you, I guess, to dig deeper. There's a
Mm-hmm.
hashtag trending on social media that career development work is so much more than talking about jobs.
Yep.
So the question to you, what in
Mm-hmm.
your opinion are we doing in career development? What's the impact of our work today?
I'll use, so David Bluestein taught me to think about a guy named Isaac Prilatensky's work on what is a good life to you. Okay. And so career development work is good life work in my mind, because I think it's safe to say that the current world is organized within a system that we call capitalism. And when that is the organizing framework, everyone except for a very, very small few number of people have to work and play work roles during the bulk of their life. And so that is a baseline that needs to be considered in building a good life, right? Just like your spiritual life is a baseline, just like your relational life is a baseline, just like your family life is a baseline. I think we need to consider career with these other baseline effects that we're more prone to think about as it's not about prestige, it's not about money, unless you do the hard work of knowing yourself and coming to the conclusion that those are the things that make life good for you, right? And so values-based work is a part of that. Narrative-based work is a part of that. My belief is, and this can be controversial for some, but your executive functioning part of your brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 25. So if we are asking people to make life trajecting career decisions at 16, 17, and 18 years of age, knowing that, then who does that serve? Who does that pressure that children and adolescents feel? That's not serving that kid, right? That's not serving that team. It's serving something else, right? Society or parents or community beliefs. It's serving something other than that child. And like, if we know that their brains can't do it for another 8 years, then why are we not thinking about it with that in mind? What we know from neuroscience in mind. But we've created our whole society around that idea, right? High school, PSATs in the United States, the college entrance test in grade 10, college at age 19, graduating from college by age, 22, and you're still not fully developed yet. And so I think it's a rethinking. Like, okay, how did we get here? What purpose would we like to serve differently? And then what changes can we make, right? What changes can we make in the near term? What changes can we make in the long term? For me, having worked with a lot of teens and young adults, it's just validating the fact that we're asking them to make decisions that feel overwhelming for many of them, right? Or validating that, even if you feel confident today, there's a good chance that you might change your mind in a few years as you develop, as you learn more. and things like that. So sometimes, again, that's more putting the human in it, right? Is like this child feels pressure, feels stress, feels anxiety, loses sleep because of a career decision that their brains are not yet developed to make well. And I'm curious, like, how do we get here and why do we do that? Right? And along the way, I try to make that child feel better about the stress that they're feeling. Normalizing, it's the counseling term.
You know what, Dr. Brian, I love how you're transitioning me to the next questions, even though you have not seen the
I was
questions.
going to say, we should state for the record in the audience, I have seen none of these questions beforehand, but we're just, Hoda, you and I have always been in sync. I've watched your stuff and I'm like, yep, we're in sync. So makes total sense to me.
Because here's my next question. It's about the School to Career book that you co-authored and is now in its 12th edition. So you really led me there because I work with young people ages 14 to 25. What are the best ways to prepare students in this tradition with, of course, this humanistic approach in mind?
So psychoeducation first, right? So like I tell a young person, okay, so here's what's happening. The school or society is putting expectations on you to make some choices, and my job is to help you make the best choice you can now. Okay. Two, I'd also like to let you know what we currently know about brain development is these choices may be very difficult for you because that part of your brain called executive functioning processes doesn't even really fully develop until you're 25 years of age. And so that's another reason why working with someone like me, I hope can be very helpful for you. The last thing I always try to prime them with, and this is more encouragement than psychoeducation, is based on what I just told you, there is a good chance that you're going to change your mind someday. And I work with thousands of kids, and many of them feel like that it is a mistake to change their mind, or they feel guilty for changing their mind, or that they're bad in some way for changing their mind. Let's think a moment. Like, there are plenty of famous people that you probably follow or admire that have only become successful in your eyes because of changing their mind, right? I like the actor Denzel Washington. He was a trash collector and a postal delivery person before he became an actor. And he liked those jobs. I've seen interviews with him. He liked the job of being a trash collector because they gave you a certain amount of work that needed to be done, and you got to go home when you were finished. So if you had a good day and wanted to work hard, you could go hang out with your friends. But he changed his mind. He was satisfied with that, and he changed his mind. And then he became, I would say, one of the greatest actors in the history of cinema, right? And so let's look around a little bit and be like, I want you to feel, I don't want to move forward until you feel okay with the fact that even if we make a career decision, it's not in stone, right? Things are going to change. And that's how do we get okay with that? How do we snap up and have fun with that fact when that's what's happening for us? Okay. So for me, so much of good career development work is what I call setting the frame, right? Like the initial expectations where you say, we're going to operate within this culture of expectations for our work together, right? And for me, just in my approach, the frame never includes the career decision, which is the reason that they came to see me most often, right? It's not what we decide, it's how we look at our life, how we find purpose, how we find joy in the process, how we become more career adaptable during our work together. And on top of that, we're going to be able to map out the next 2 or 3 steps that you're probably going to take. But as I say to younger people, don't get it twisted. We're here to make you and your life better, and career decisions are a part of what comes out of that process. So for me, it's setting the frame as the student's best interest from what I know about human development. And then career decisions are a task that we do while we do that.
I like that a lot because to me, it's always let's get to know you and then figure out your next steps for today.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion, Dr. Brian, about SMART goals and
Mm.
making short term, middle term, and long term goals that we were very attached to in the past. And right now, as a field, we're stepping away from that. What are
Yep.
your thoughts on SMART goals and what are the expectations for young people?
SMART goals are a highly effective tool to accomplish tasks that do not include helping human beings navigate their life. And so SMART goals are developed in the field of business, right? And this idea of specific, measurable, so on and so on. Boy, SMART goals. I don't use them anymore. So wait, specific, measurable, what was the achievable, realistic, and time to limit, right? And so that works if you need to create an X number of widgets within the next 3 months, right? So it works for certain tasks that are production oriented or possibly problem solving oriented, although I like design thinking for problem oriented things a little bit more personally. But human development is a non-linear activity, and trying to make a human being feel like that should be linear is disrupting the natural way that they feel and experience the world in their life. Okay. And so for me, again, I use the word setting the frame. It's just setting a series of frames, right? Like we're thinking about this. And then when collaboratively we feel comfortable moving forward, then we're talking collaboratively about like, what's the next frame here, right? And so, for example, in career development, a lot of people, and I don't have a problem with this, it's not my way, but like they come in and they're like, before we meet, you're taking these 3 assessments, okay? Those assessments set the frame, right? If it's an interest assessment, a personality assessment, and a skills assessment, you're clearly communicating that we are here to talk about your interest, your personality, and your skills as measured by these assessments. Okay? That's not as empowering to me as talking to a client for a while and being like, you know what, this keeps coming up, but it seems to me you have some questions about, what you're really interested in. One of the ways that career development professionals deal with that is by doing some sort of assessment. Do you think it would be helpful for me to describe a couple of options that you might take that we could talk about together? Okay. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Well, here are 3 ways that we can do that. One is I can give you what's called a quantitative assessment, which is filling out numerical answers to a series of questions. I use one that's free called Hoda Interest Profiler, 60 multiple choice type questions. And from that, we'll have a report that we can talk about. Okay. A second way that we can do that is we can do a card sort from someone that I had training from named Dick Nodell. His name is on the front of the card sort. And we can actually, it's almost like playing cards, but it's all you categorizing your interest in these interests, basically, right? Like what it is that you want to do. The third way is like we can just find structured ways to talk about it more, and maybe you can do some homework type exploration in between sessions, right? And so I like a technique called narrative. And so it's basically me helping you to tell structured stories. And out of those stories, we might get ideas that suggest something that you might be interested in. And then I would point you to a couple of websites and maybe a couple of local employers that you would look into, and then come back and talk to me about your experience of visiting or learning more about those particular careers. I always let you pick. Do you have any questions about any of those? Do you have a strong sense of which one you would like to try first? Okay. And what I did there is very important to me with career decision stuff. It's what we want to do first and what we want to do next, because we want to use language to let them know that this is an ongoing, lifelong process, not an end of the road. And so what type of career do you want to pursue is very different for me than what type of career do you want to pursue next, because we're just putting into their psychology, oh, this isn't the end, or oh, if this doesn't go as planned, I don't have any other options. No, it's a next. That's what we do here. Lots of next.
I love how you called goals frameworks rather than goals. So, because I've been trying to get rid of the word goal and SMART goals.
And just from a science perspective, like I'm also a researcher and a professor and a scholar. Like I'm not aware of any compelling evidence that says that our habitual use of SMART goals for the past 30 years is not enhancing career development, right? So I think, when you think about the research, like, you can get an outcome of a career choice, but that career choice outcome is at the point of decision, and then you never look forward for the rest of their life, right? It's not a longitudinal outcome. And so I want to know, okay, I helped you make a career choice. Can we touch base in 3 months to see how you're doing with your career decision? Okay. And again, that's setting them up for a long runway from now until the end of life, basically. And I think that's the perspective that is healthier to bring to our clients' lives versus this goal-directed, short-term expectation setting sort of idea.
I think we've certainly touched on a controversial idea that you and I are both on the same side too much, but we'll leave it to the audience to judge us on this.
Sure,
but I
yeah.
agree with everything you said in that it's about what's next and it's not written in stone. I've come to the last question, Dr. Brian, and this one is about your challenges. Because I work with young people and because we tell them this is what's next, and really keep yourself in that stretch zone, what we're calling now, so stepping out of your comfort zone. What are the challenges that Dr. Brian is going to take in the near future that you'd like to share with the audience?
What I'm most focused on at this stage of my career development is deeper impacts. What I've tried to, so I've done like speaking and training and stuff like that. I'm really only trying to do work where I'm going there multiple times. So for example, I think I get to see you in Egypt for the first time in a couple of months. That'll be my third trip back to Egypt. And I've worked with some career development camps for youth there, and I'm trying to help establish the Arab Career Development Association. My value system is really formed around this idea of I don't feel a sense of wanting to do things unless the impact of what I do is noticeable 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's really investing in hard places to do the work and repetitively engaging with them over time to try to create some lasting value. That's not the easiest thing to do, right? I don't speak Arabic. I am not wealthy, so I don't have unlimited resources. So I have to make good decisions, right, for sustainability. But that's sort of like the guiding principle for me right now in my choice. So I have the privilege of a lot of choice now in the work that I do. And for me, that's the guiding principle. I want there to be something there later and not just a feeling in a moment, which I feel like I've been guilty of. I feel like I've gone in and like given a talk and then fly out and like nothing was left behind.
I do sense from watching where you're going and that you do try to immerse yourself in the culture now. So it's not about presenting at the conference and goodbye. You kind of talk about whether it's Dubai or Egypt or India or wherever you go.
Yep.
What recommendations would you have to someone looking up to you as a role model and looking to immerse themselves in their culture while showing their best work?
Yeah. Starting out, I'll tell a story. So I really started to do what I would call cross-cultural work, working in an urban, poor African-American community in the United States in St. Louis, Missouri. And I was much younger than I am today, much less experienced, and showed up like I think a lot of white guys show up in the world, which is like, I'm here, I'm smart, I have answers. And luckily I had a priest that had worked in that community for many years, didn't know him, but he pulled me aside. And I really respond, I think, well to when people pull me aside and try to give me advice. And he said to me, he's like, my sense is that your heart is in the right place. His name was Father Gary. My sense is your heart is in the right place. If you really want to do good here, you have to learn to stand in line. And I'm like, I don't know if I know what you mean. And he's like, think about it. He wouldn't tell me the answer.
Oh no.
And so, which I think was very wise, because I had to spend a lot of time thinking about, like, what could this possibly mean? For me, it all has to do with a sense of understanding this natural human impulse for entitlement, right? So I was a new Ph.D. at the time, right? Like, oh, I know things, right? I don't know anything about being poor and African American in an urban environment where there's toxic chemicals, no transportation, and no jobs, right? Like, I don't know that lived reality. And so for me, standing in line was just understanding that, like, I had to come without my plan and just show support until they ask me to be a part of their plan. And I don't always get that right, because I'm human, right? Like, sometimes I think I know more than I probably know, or think I understand more than I think that I understand. But particularly if you're coming from a position of privilege of any kind or power of any kind, I think you have to ask yourself, am I willing to just show up and not have an impact until asked, until invited? And so I think that's important from my sort of positionality. Now, there's the other side, right? There's the people that I would call those affected, right? The career development professionals that are part of a more marginalized sort of community, right? That don't have resources, that aren't wealthy, that don't have power. For that group, again, I say this with all humility, because that has not been me since I was very, very young, right? I think it's about collaboration with other people in your community, and then trying to get a sense of who might be someone with power or privilege, right? That might be kind, generous, and willing, right? And I hope I'm that person too in my life, right? I've just seen a lot of what I would call maybe well-intentioned but poorly designed activity, right? Anyone who's ever been in a place of poverty, like, there's no shortage of outside, mostly Western, mostly white helpers that come in and be like, we will give funding for this program, but you have to run this program by my ideology, right? By my belief system, by the way I do things, using SMART goals, right? And I just don't think that there's enough responsiveness from the helper a lot of times to understand and actually be led by the people that you're trying to help. So I feel like I'm going to be trying to get good at that for the rest of my life and the rest of my career. But that's the biggest thing. I think that's the most important thing that I think goes wrong too often.
Definitely well ahead of the game. When I talked to Ahmed Mustafa Kamal about his experience with you coming down to Egypt, you were very humble and willing to learn through the process of working in Career Week. So he was awed by all the support you provided and how you got it.
Well, and honestly, I've seen career camps all over the world. His career camp model in Egypt is very organized, very spectacular, but unique in that they build in emotion awareness and emotion regulation throughout all of the career camp, right? So, like, the most important soft skill that someone of a young age could be learning, which is about themselves and their emotions and how to regulate their emotions appropriately, is built throughout the entire camp. And I was like, smarter than me. Like, that's what I preach, and I've never put it into action. This is amazing, right? And so I think that's the other piece too. There's a lot of cultural artifact in the world, right? Where I think a lot of cultures want to look to the West, right? Or look to an NCDA. And that's okay. But who's looking to understand, oh my goodness, some of the best career development in the world is happening in low technology, low funding places, right? And that's where some of the best stuff is happening. And high technology places too, right? But like,
Yeah.
We don't want to forget, right? I don't want to forget. At least I will go anywhere to find the best of what we do. And you mentioned Raza as well, but and I could name other people, but I'm from the United States, right? NCDA started 112 years ago, I think. So part of me is almost jealous, but like, how is it that these people actually start this field in a country and a culture where it's not existed before, right? Where you're building something from scratch, and then the something that you're building from scratch becomes such high quality that everyone in the world is able to learn from it and learn from you. And like, I'll never, again, talk about not ever knowing what something feels like. I'll never get to know what that feels like. But like, any contribution I've made has been me joining a system that has been running for 113 years now, or 112 years now. But like that's the people that we should be writing books about and having as keynote speakers, like starting it from the beginning, right? Like Frank Parsons did, right? In Boston so many years ago. Like, there's got to be things that we can learn from there. And in high economically developed countries too, right? Like if we look at like Qatar, Saudi Arabia right now, right? Countries that have wealth, but that are starting career development within the last 10 or 20 years. There's a lot to learn from those sorts of settings as well. And so one thing I would want is the West, for lack of a better term, to just be more open to learning from what's happening in the global East, in the global South, because I just think there's so much value there that we're missing because we tend to be a little self-focused. Oh, that was controversial too. You and I are bringing fire, Hoda. We're saying the hard things.
Well, these were all the questions I had prepared for you, Dr. Brian. Was there anything else? One more controversial note you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
Do you want one? I could give you one more.
Yeah, sure. Why not? We're having too much fun with this. One more topic.
So the other thing I think the most about right now, and again, this is like a technology current history point in time thing, is that I worry that what's driving the direction of the field is coming more from marketing than it is from science, right? And I am an academic, but I have a company too. I actually started my career in marketing research, but a lot of what people are bringing into their practice or adopting into their practice is who marketed to them the best. And that's fine. But like, I think that we need to pay a little bit more attention to the tools that we use and whether or not they actually have evidence that supports their effectiveness, or that, and also that supports the population that you're serving. I think research shows that like still almost 90% of the evidence that we claim in the field is still weird, right? Western, Western, industrialized, rich, democratic, and I skipped the letter, right? But like, we still are showing a lot of bias in the evidence that we have. And then there's a lot of selling going on of tools and things that maybe haven't been fully vetted yet. And I think practitioners just need to sort of develop more of a critical consumer mind again. So I'll put that one out there too. We should do a top 10 list of the most controversial things that we can come up with. I don't feel like you've said anything controversial. Oh no, you said SMART goals. So that one's you. And then I think you've gotten me to say all the rest of them.
Well, it was your interview, your opportunity to share your thoughts in the field, and that's very important. And I appreciate your willingness to talk about them.
When I teach critical theory, I put a picture on the PowerPoint of an elephant with a bouquet of flowers in its trunk, and say, I will never critique your outfit, Hoda, because I only critique things that I care about. And obviously, I don't care about fashion. So any critiques I've had for career development is because I love it. I love the people that do it. And I want us to maximize our potential to do good in the world. And I think that's the intention of most people, but things move so fast in this modern world. It's really easy to wake up one day and be like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this thing for so long and I'm not sure why I do it. anymore, or I'm not sure that it's still the best way to do it.
Definitely. These are controversial topics that we're putting out there to make the field better, not to challenge anyone or be disruptors, as you mentioned early on in the. There you go. There's your disruptor.
Nice. The whole thing tied together very nicely there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brian, for your time. I had a blast. I had a great time with this conversation, and I truly appreciate the time you spent with me.
And thank you for doing this, Hoda. Like, for the field, you're adding a lot of cultural value to the field of career development with these interviews.
It's fabulous that you were able to join Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to empower you to succeed. Our guest today on Hoda's Career Info was Global Career Guy, Dr. Brian Hutchison. You can connect with Dr. Brian on LinkedIn. In this episode, Dr. Brian shares, particularly in the West, we can get this idea of individualism in our head. And I think that is an inaccurate idea. Do you agree? Comment and share your thoughts and experiences. Remember, you can watch Hoda's Career Info on YouTube or listen to the episode on your favorite podcast app. To let me know if you're interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Please like, subscribe, share, and follow me, Hoda Kilani, on social media. Together, let us increase career info. I am your host, Hoda. Until next time, take the time to pause, reflect, and celebrate what you have achieved.